Get lumped up tonight. Listen to Rob Rossi and RockerMike. On the only podcast that I'll hear that won't make me wanna rip off my ears. Oh, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show. The Rock Show, oh, I want the Rock Show. The Rock Show, 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 the Rock Show.
Hello, people, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Rock Show, episode 168. And today we're talking about a hell of an album, the making of the...
Go Said Soup by the Rolling Stones, yeah.
Soup. This is an album. Supposedly, this is the 13 American studio album by the British band, the Rolling Stones.
Right. It's the 11th British release and the 13th American release.
Yeah, what was that? Did they release more stuff in America?
Yeah, in the early days, in the 60s, there was a couple albums that came out in America that didn't come out in England because, if you remember, England was very big on EPs.
Yeah.
Okay, so what they used to do in America, EPs weren't big here. So they would combine like two EPs and make an album out of it. So that happened a couple of times to Stones, and they ended up with more releases in America. That's a common thing. Today's episode is brought to you by Park Dental. Park Dental Care in South Richmond Hill, Queens. 718-847-3800 and 718dentist.com. Okay. Great guys in there. You will not leave in pain. They do good work. They take all kinds of insurance. So, Goat Said Soup. I don't know what more I could say about this record. It's one of my favorites by the band. Some people have varying opinions of this album. We'll talk about that a little bit. Right, that was the original album cover, one of the ideas, and that got rejected. Obviously, looking at it, that would be a little scary.
Yeah.
There was also another version. They were going to have the Rolling Stones as centaurs, like half horse, half person. That never happened. And you ended up with this kind. That was the back cover of Keith Richards was on the back.
Yeah.
It came out August 31st, 1973. All right. On Rolling Stones Records, which was their own label that they had for a while in the 70s. They signed other bands to Rolling Stones Records. Peter Tosh was on it, a few other people.
Yep.
And the interesting thing is that this was the follow-up to the double album, classic album, Exile on Main Street, which we also did a making of a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that was a great album.
Yeah. And, how do you follow that up? Okay. They were still tax exiles. Okay. A lot of countries wouldn't have them in.
Wow.
Okay. Even in America, I think they were kind of like allowed to be in for a while to work, and then they had to leave. It wasn't like they were allowed to stay for extended periods of time. This was a time still, 73, the Stones were outlaws in a lot of ways. Okay. Parents were still afraid of them, okay, for your kids to be listening to them. But this album kind of represents a change of all that, which I'll go into a little bit. Right. That is Dancing with Mr. D is the first song on there. Most of the record was recorded outside of the UK. All right. They were still British citizens, but because they were tax exiles, they could not record much in England, or they would just be taxed at 95%. Goat's Head Soup was recorded mostly in Jamaica. All right, the island of Jamaica. Some tracks were recorded in the UK and some in the United States. The first single was the well-known ballad Angie that went to number one.
Yep.
Okay, in America, and it did very well. I think it was like top 5 in England, something like that. Beginning with 1968's Beggar's Banquet, this album was the last one produced by Jimmy Miller. Jimmy Miller had done all of them from Beggar's Banquet on.
They were all great, man. Why was
that stretch of I can't think of too many bands off the top of my head that had such a roll of albums from that period of time, a 5-year period, to put out just such amazing, timeless material. And it kind of stretched over a period in the band where they had changed. 68, Brian Jones was still in the band, okay, though he was on his way out. Then Let It Bleed, okay, he plays a little bit on that, and then they bring in Mick Taylor for Sticky Fingers, and he's still in the band, going into when they're recording Goat's Head Soup. That stretch of music is not a bad song. I mean, everything is just timeless, And I think it would kind of end with this album, okay? And I'll go into that more after.
Hey, now, Mike, let me ask you, why did Jimmy Miller, did he retire? Was he just done with working with the Stones?
He had a very bad heroin habit.
Ooh.
And I think he had become kind of unreliable.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they stopped
for so many years.
Well, yeah, and he, it just fell apart for him. He had a bad heroin habit by 73, and the Stones said, "We're not working with you anymore when we do the next album," which was It's Only Rock and Roll.
Yeah, wow.
Now, bassist Bill Wyman only appears on 3 songs on this record. Okay, never had a real understanding why he wasn't so involved. It's just one of those things. Mick Jagger, Charlie Watts, Keith Richards, and Mick Taylor appear on all the tracks except for the song Winter, which Keith Richards does not appear on. Okay, Winter doesn't include Keith on anything. They used Mick, for instance, plays guitar on that with Mick Taylor, 2 Micks.
Yeah.
The usual extra musicians that the Stones had at this period were included. Nicky Hopkins on piano, Ian Stewart on piano, Bobby Keys on sax, Billy Preston also on keyboards and piano. They're all over this record. Every song features them at some point. Now the album
was it Billy Preston like the 5th Beatle?
Yeah, the Stones used him too.
Wow.
Yeah. The Stones. He was popular on both ends of that spectrum. Now, Goat's Head Soup went to number 1 in the United States and the UK, the album itself, and some other countries as well. It did very well. However, it received kind of like mixed reviews. All right, some say that it kind of marks a decline of the band after this point. Now, as far as like songwriting ability and things like that, I don't agree with that. I think that is saved for the next album. It's Only Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
All right, and I'll get into that a little bit more.
Yeah, this album was a big album after that huge album that it did. Then to come with this album, I thought this album was a great follow-up.
Well, back up for a second, because Exile on Main Street took a long time to really catch on.
Yeah.
Okay. They did this big double album, recorded it mostly in south of France. And it sold. It went top 10, but kind of dropped. It quickly dropped off. The problem is it was a double album, okay, and it was more expensive, and some people just didn't want to get a double album, and it took a while. By the late 70s, Exile on Main Street was starting to get recognized as the classic that it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a timeless record. I listen to it often. But how do you follow that up? Okay. I always had the impression that Jagger, in particular Jagger, because to me, Exile on Main Street is a Richards record. I see it that way. Okay. And Jagger seemed to kind of want to put it behind him. Like, I don't think he embraced Exile on Main Street as much as maybe the other members, and particularly Richards. That's just my opinion, things that I've read. I mean, I've read some things that, they really wanted to move on from that whole thing. So when they did this album, Goat's Head Soup, some people thought that it wasn't as good as Exile or anything before that, and it marks a kind of decline. I don't agree with that. I agree with Lester Bangs. Lester Bangs, the great rock critic, actually said that, It's Only Rock and Roll, that album, is the first Stones record that doesn't mean anything. And wow. I kind of agreed with him, because prior to that, the Stones were outlaws. Okay. They were still kind of like, your parents were pissed off if you were listening to them. They still were kind of like, dirty and drug addicted and drunk and all this shit that you weren't supposed to be listening to, right. Exile on Main Street. And when It's Only Rock and Roll came out, and I like the record, I don't love it. I like the record. And Mick Taylor's on it, and it's the last one with him. But a song like It's Only Rock and Roll is not taken seriously. The lyrics, he said, it's only rock and roll, but I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, your whole life was rock and roll. It was based around that life. Okay. And now you're saying, oh, it's only rock and roll, but I like it. Like, it's kind of like they changed. Okay. Not that they didn't have good songs after that. I mean, Some Girls is a good record. Even Black and Blue has grown on me over the years. It's taken a while. But Goat's Head Soup, to me, still is a classic record, as much as Exile, as much as Sticky Fingers and Let It Bleed. It's like that whole era. Okay, right. So upon the album's release, the band embarked on a tour of Europe. And now this album has been remastered several times.
Yeah.
1994, it came out. 2009, Virgin Records put it out, remastered. And it was remixed and remastered again in 2020 as a deluxe set, which I'll talk about a little more at the end of the show.
Right?
Yeah, right. It came with, vinyl. And there was different versions of it. You can get just a CD version. But the best version of it came with, vinyl, the remastered version of it, one with the bonus tracks, songs like Crisscross Man, on there, Scarlet, which was a song with Jimmy Page on it that was kind of lost for a long time that they found. When it got reissued in 2020, it went to #1 again in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah, so it did very well. And I'll talk a little bit more about what was on that collection at the end of the show. In November of '72, the band wanted to follow up the successful Exile on Main Street album. They relocated down to Dynamic Sound Studio in Kingston, Jamaica.
Wow.
Now, Jamaica was picked because Keith Richards had a residence there, okay, but also because very few countries would have them for any long period of time. Okay, so they could move freely throughout Jamaica. And they also used a lot of Jamaican musicians on this album, which I'll get to in a second. One other country that Richards said he was allowed to be free in was Switzerland.
Yeah.
Okay. But they didn't want to pick Switzerland because really, to go to Switzerland, you have to like skiing. There's just a lot of skiing. Okay. And Keith Richards did not like to ski. All right. So he didn't want to be there. So that was the spot, Jamaica, where they could be the most creative and free and not worry too much about getting kicked out of the country. All right, after a certain amount of time. Plus, they were down with the reggae going on and the weed and the women and all that stuff, Now, like Exile on Main Street, Goat's Head Soup was recorded in short, concentrated periods If you remember, Exile was recorded, a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were all in separate rooms in that castle. But Goat's Head Soup was in the studio, and they would record it like 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. And, Jamaica itself, the island itself, was a big influence to the band. The main sound engineer was a guy named Mikey Chung, who was actually Chinese. There's a large Chinese population in Jamaica. They used a lot of local Jamaican percussionists. There's some Guyanese musicians on this record. And, the Stones were always very impressed with the pool of studio session people that are available in Jamaica. It's very diverse. It's not just Jamaican. It's many different people. So the first track that they worked on was the song Winter, which originally was kind of formed and put together by Mick Taylor, just strumming the guitar in the studio, and it all kind of just fell into place. The main theme of the lyrics evolved from an earlier 1968 outtake called Blood Red Wine. All right, the lyrics were taken from that. Now, Winter is the only track, I mentioned this earlier, that Keith Richards does not play on. Electric rhythm guitar is played by Mick Jagger, okay, and Mick Taylor is also, of course, on it. Now, after leaving the Stones, Mick Taylor would record Winter with an artist named Carla Olson for her album, The Ring of Truth. And also he would record Silver Train, another Goat's Head Soup track, their Too Hot for Snakes album, okay? Just as a side note, Mick would like those two songs enough to redo them. Now, the ballad Angie, which is the most well-known song off this album, was the lead single off of it, okay? It was the very first single they put out. But it was really an unpopular choice because Atlantic Records wanted a more rock-heavy song to be the. They were looking for another Brown Sugar, which I think the Stones really weren't going to make at that point, okay? But not that there aren't any rockin' tunes on there. In fact, the B-side of Angie is actually Silver Train, which is a pretty rockin' song, okay? Yeah. And Atlantic Records, who distributed everything that was on Rolling Stones records, okay, wanted a Brown Sugar type song, but they got Angie as the first single. And it's always been rumored, I don't know, when you think of Angie, have you heard the rumors about this song, Rob?
No, what are the rumors? What are the rumors?
It's always rumored to be about Angela Bowie. Okay, but Jagger and Richards have always denied that. They've always said it's not true. Okay. But in 1993...
Until Dancing on the Street when he finally... Bowie.
This was 10 years before that. But they were friends. Bowie and Jagger were friends. There's those stories that Angela caught them in bed together. Yeah, I don't know if those are urban legends or it's true. Who knows? Okay. But, supposedly she fooled around with Mick Jagger. I don't know. Okay. But Jagger and Richards said it's nothing to do with that. Richards in 93, though, did say that it was inspired by his daughter, who was born around that time, named Dandelion Angela. Okay. But he would contradict himself again in 2010 in his memoir called Life, which is an excellent read if you haven't read it yet. He just said in that book that Angie was a name that came to his head, that he just kept saying Angie, Angie, Angie. It just kind of like it worked. So it wasn't anybody in particular. He even said he didn't know his daughter was going to be named Angela. Supposedly, Dandelion, he was married to Anita Pallenberg at that point and had the kid. And Anita named the daughter Dandelion, okay, but it was in a Catholic hospital that she was born. So they kind of gave her a hard time and said, well, you got to give her a proper Catholic name. So the middle name became Angela. That's how it goes. Now, Jagger himself has said that the lyrics were really inspired from his breakup with Marianne Faithfull, which kind of makes sense. which kind of makes sense. So that's really what that's about. And that's a song that they've done pretty consistently in their live set since. A couple of times I've seen them, they've done that song. And it's great. I always love that song. So recording of the album was completed in January of 73 in Los Angeles, and also totally finished in May of 73 at London's Island Studios. The song Silver Train was actually left over. It was a song that they had recorded during these 1970 sessions at Olympic Sounds in the UK, but they re-recorded it in Los Angeles at Village Recorders just for this album, even though they had an earlier version of it. Now, Goat's Head Soup was the first Stones record since Satanic Majesty's Request in 67 that didn't have a cover song on it.
Wow.
Okay, there was all originals on Goat's Head Soup. The sessions for Goat's Head Soup were abundant themselves with outtakes. There's lots of outtakes from this that they didn't use. Two of these was called Tops, and another one, called Waiting on a Friend.
Yeah.
Okay, Waiting on a Friend actually came out of those Goat's Head Soup sessions, ended up on Tattoo You in 1981, and they do feature Mick Taylor on guitar, him playing guitar on Waiting on a Friend.
You know what it is? A lot of times these bands go into the studio, they make a bunch of songs, but it doesn't fit the motion of the album, so they'll say, you know what, we'll use it in another album. So that's something that always happens in the business.
And also, I think it's about an album being too long and you have to cut some out. Okay, it's like, all right, we'll save this for the next one. And then a band like the Stones that's always busy, you probably lose track of these things after a while. Like you forget you recorded it,
You know what? That's almost, you want to hear something this is a little off subject, but The Godfather, somebody almost winded up cutting the movie to only 2 hours. Imagine they only would have done and cut all those great scenes. They wanted to cut a bunch of scenes out.
Yeah.
Watch the whole thing because they wanted more time to be able to play in the movie theater. They wanted to show it many, many times, but it turned out to be a #1 hit.
Yeah, it didn't matter. It was 2 hours and 45 minutes, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the music industry. I mean, singles, for instance, were always kept down to 3 minutes.
Yep.
Okay, but a few, even like Light My Fire by The Doors, right?
Yeah.
I believe that the single of it, I'm pretty sure if I remember right, they had a single version that was shortened. We've heard it on the radio. They cut out the whole organ solo in the middle.
Okay.
But trying to remember, there's a couple of songs that were done like they cut the song in half and put one on one side, one on the other. Okay, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And it's all about the 3-minute record.
Yeah.
But as time went on, the late 60s and 70s, they would allow 4 or 5 minute singles and things like that.
Yeah.
Double albums are always a problem. They're expensive to make, and you got to charge more. So bands try to, they're often asked to stay away from that. But that would change later, Rob, because when CDs came out, okay, you could hold about an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes on a CD.
Yeah.
And I found that bands were putting out too much just to fill that time.
Yeah.
In the 90s and the 2000s. Okay. A few bands, trying to remember. I think even like Iggy Pop, I remember a couple of his solo records. They were like close to an hour long. And I'm like, Iggy, what are you doing, man? You don't need my attention span ain't that good, man. I can't sit and listen to an hour and 10-minute record all the time,
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, you're right. It's about cutting things down. All right, so there's bands always have outtakes, and the Stones are one of these bands that their outtakes are better than what most people put out for regular songs.
Yeah.
Tattoo You in '81 was an album of outtakes.
Outtakes, yeah.
Start Me Up was originally a reggae song that they changed. It was an old song that they had.
And Guns N' Roses did that. That Spaghetti album was the whole album of outtakes and songs.
Well, that was all covers that I think some might have been outtakes at the time, but they had decided to do an album of covers. That's a little different. Yeah. You know, I mean, the Stones did Blue and Lonesome a few years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's a great record. And, you know, all covers, blues covers. I wish that they would start going down that road again and make a solid record of that. But I digress. We're getting off topic here. But now, getting back to Goat's Head Soup, you had Waiting on a Friend as an outtake. There was also a track called Through the Lonely Nights. That would end up on the B-side of the next album's title track, It's Only Rock and Roll single. Okay, the single for It's Only Rock and Roll. It's a soft rock ballad kind of thing, and it features Richards on wah-wah, which, you know, he was using wah-wah quite a bit on Goat's Head Soup, which I think it's really the only album that he uses those features extensively, okay? And it's such a timepiece of the 70s. You know, a lot of soul funk bands were using the wah-wah pedal, the Temptations, you know, we used a lot. Papa Was a Rolling Stone has wah-wah pedal all over it. You know, I mean, it's a cool effect, and it was used a lot in the 70s by many bands. And the Stones use it a lot on Goat's Head Soup, and I love it. I love that sound. And for them, it was perfect. Now, another track was called Short and Curly's, okay? And that actually started in the Goat's Head Soup sessions, but ended up on the next album, It's Only Rock and Roll. Now, at the time of its release, Jagger said he felt really close to this album, okay? And he had put all his effort into it. He didn't say that so much about Exile. And I don't think, like I said in the beginning, I think that he might have felt closer to this record than Exile. It was more of a personal thing. Maybe Angie, maybe because of the song Angie, if it was about Marianne Faithfull and his big breakup with her, you know, maybe that makes it a more personal record to him. Now, the lead single, Angie, had Silver Train as the B-side, and it went right to number one with a rock in the United States.
That's not a bad beat-side song either. Those are two pretty solid songs.
No, and I think that there might have been a compromise with that because they did want a rock song to be the A-side. They made it the B-side. There might have been a compromise there. I just always thought that was interesting. Worldwide, the song did very well as well. But the album itself wasn't without any controversy. There was quite a bit, okay? The song Star Star was banned by the BBC about a month after the album came out because of the lyrics, all right? This is the last song on the album, and he's saying, you're a star fucker, star fucker, star fucker, star fucker, star, okay? And the Stones wanted to call the song Star Fucker. All right, that was the original title of it.
Yeah.
Atlantic Records president, Ahmet Ertegun, he said, no, you can't do that. If you have Star Fucker listed on the album, if it's on there, there's stores that won't carry the record. Okay, if you remember, the MC5 had a lot of problems because Kick Out the Jams on their first record says Kick Out the Jams motherfucker, and they left it on there. And then all these like old, you know, retail stores like Corvettes like wouldn't carry it. You know what I mean? So the Stones, in autumn of '73, the album came out at the end of August. By the fall, they were ready to start a tour of Europe. And their set allowed for 4 slots for new songs to be put in, okay? 4 new songs from Goat's Head Soup. Now, the band performed Heartbreaker, which is also called Do 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 Do, okay? One of my all-time favorite Stones songs. I love that song. Star Star was played, Dancing with Mr. D, and Angie, of course, okay? Now, they also, at some early gigs on that tour, played Silver Train and a song called 100 Years Ago, which is a very cool song. At some point in those European tours, they they dropped those two. I'm not sure why, but it became those four were part of the tour. On later tours, Angie was pretty much the only track from this album that they would play. Okay. 2002 to 2003, the 40 Licks tour, they brought back Star Star and Silver Train and Dancing with Mr. D. I did hear them do that. I saw them on that tour. They also played these songs in 2014 and 2017 as well. What's that?
Ain't it weird when they do stuff like that they won't play certain songs? Like there might be a song that they play once and then you'll never hear it again live. What is that about? Is it like creative or?
It could be all various reasons. Like I remember the first time I saw the Stones was the Steel Wheels tour in '89 at Shea Stadium, and they were performing. Remember, they did 5 nights in a row. Yeah. And I was with a friend of mine, big Stones fans, and they were performing 2,000 Light Years from Home for the very first time.
Wow.
That song was from 1967's Satanic Majesty's Request. And they had never performed this song, first of all, because they quickly forgot about that record. Okay, and they both. I think Richards and Jagger agreed that they couldn't do a psychedelic, Sgt. Pepper type thing. Though I love the record, but almost none of that stuff was ever performed live. Okay, and 2,000 Light Years from Home, it's very produced. You have a lot of spacey psychedelic sounds that they couldn't duplicate in the 60s live. Okay, so it wasn't done, and. If you think about it, even the Beatles, they never toured Sgt. Pepper. They weren't touring anymore at that point. Could they have toured it? Not really. Not the way it sounds. It would have been stripped down. You could do an unplugged thing, maybe. It would sound totally different. Okay, but they had become a studio band at that point. Now the Stones were always a touring band.
Yeah,
but they have such a catalog that it's got to be hard to put a set list together and please everybody. You can't.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So there's always going to be songs that you want to hear, and oh man, why didn't they play that one? Even the hits, they got so many hits they can't play all the hits.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm going to shit on them right now, because I'm still mad about this, is they're not playing Brown Sugar anymore.
Whoa.
Okay, they stopped playing it on this. I think it was this tour, or because the tour got fucked up because of COVID. All right, and now they're back. They're not playing Brown Sugar anymore because they're what it's about. Okay, and they're being all politically correct, and just fuck you to all of them for that. I don't think it's Richards. I think it's Jagger, from what I've heard. Okay. Everybody wants to hear Brown Sugar, so they should do that song. But
yeah,
I heard they're not doing it anymore. But there's plenty of other songs to do. So, hopefully they put something in its place that is just as good. Now, the other controversy with this Goat's Head Soup record was the original album cover. Okay. The one with the goat's head. There you go. Okay. Yeah, that would be a little scary. The kids might not like looking at that. The parents don't want to look at some goat's head in bloody boiling water. Okay.
Hungry.
Yeah. I mean, so they rejected that. I wonder if that's a real goat's head.
It might be, man.
No. Could they say no animals were harmed at the making of this album? So they went with this. But there was another. We don't have a picture of it. There was another idea of having the Stones as like half horse, half human centaurs. Okay, of Greek mythology. But I don't think there was ever a picture made of it. They ended up going with that album cover, and it was designed by a guy named Ray Lawrence and photographed by someone named David Bailey. He was a friend of Jagger's who had worked with the band since 1964, different capacities. The portrait of Jagger on the front cover was life size almost. I mean, it was the 12-inch of his head. Okay. Mick Jagger was very reluctant to be shot enveloped in pink chiffon. Okay. That's a pink chiffon veil his head is wrapped in. Okay. And Bailey said it was supposed to be reminiscent of Katharine Hepburn in The African Queen. If you remember, there's a movie, the movie with Humphrey Bogart, where she's on the boat with him and they're fighting, not getting along. There's a scene where she's kind of behind a veil. So that was the idea. I think, and I mentioned this before we went on the air, but I always thought it looked like his head was in a flame. Okay, put it up again. Can you put it up again?
Yeah.
Doesn't it look like it's like the head of a match?
Yeah.
I like a match on fire. Yeah. Okay. You know, and in my research for doing the podcast, I didn't find anything that was their idea, but that's just something. Whenever I looked at it, I always thought it was reminiscent of a flame. Look at the Richards one, the back cover. Yeah. Doesn't that look like a flame?
That definitely looks like a flame.
Okay. He was wrapped in a chiffon kind of thing, too. And then the band on the inside cover, because it was a gatefold, right? It opened up. The middle was right there, okay, where Charlie is. And then, you know, Mick Taylor on the right and Bill Wyman on the left, I believe. And, you know, it just looked like their heads were on fire. But no one has ever said that was the idea. So I don't know. Just an impression I had. Now, what I want to talk about now is the deluxe edition, okay, that came out in 2020. It was a little pricey, okay. I've seen it as much as like $150. Now I think it's down. It's under 100. 2 years, you know, we'll change that. It came with a vinyl collection of the album. It came with a vinyl collection of the extra tracks, the bonus tracks. Okay, outtakes of the album. They found a song called Scarlet that was featured on this set. Okay, that was actually an outtake that Jimmy Page had come down from Led Zeppelin, come down to the studios and jammed. And they ended up, recording. And it's a good song, okay? There was another one on there called Crisscross Man, which I've had as bootleg, outtakes on different bootleg CDs over the years. It's a good song. I've heard it many times, but it was the first time it was officially released. Also, to me, the gem of this is the sound of Goat's Head Soup itself, the remastered version of it, all the same original tracks. But the real gem, for me, is the live concert. It was called a Brussels Affair. Okay, right. It's live in Brussels. For many years, it was a bootleg. It's one of the most popular bootlegged, live albums of the Stones that was ever been there. They really were killing it on this tour, okay? It's interesting because in Brussels they speak French, and Jagger is speaking French to the audience and everything, and it's just kind of cool. And, they do songs on this tour that they never did again, okay? Or hadn't done in, it took them 30 years to bring them back, okay? So I think it's worth it. I think it's if you could find it, shop around, you might find it cheaper. I think Amazon had it for about $75 recently. Okay, so it's worth it. Of course, all these things are out on YouTube and you can listen to it. But one thing too is it comes with a book. Okay, it comes with a nice book with a lot of pictures and liner notes.
Yeah, right there.
Right there. Top left. Yeah. I don't recall who did the liner notes, to be honest with you, but it's worth it. To just sometimes the books are so cool in these collections, it's worth it just for that. So I got today, Mr. Rossi, Goat's Head Soup.
Very good, man. That's another making of. I really enjoy the make of these albums because we get to just talk about one album of a certain band.
Yeah.
And you really look at it, you're like thinking, wow, look at that. These songs, why the songs came out, why these songs were playing. And it's pretty impressive, like all the stuff that they do.
I want to mention again, just to be clear, is I don't think this record really represents the decline of the Stones. Okay, I think the next album does that for the reasons I mentioned earlier about it. Just kind of they're not taking themselves as seriously anymore. Okay, this is 73. Goat's Head Soup. 74 was It's Only Rock and Roll, but I like it. Okay, I mean it just they were starting to become. They weren't the Rolling Stones anymore. They were becoming the Stones. Okay, and they were becoming like jet set. They weren't together as much anymore. They didn't record in the same place as much anymore. By 74, 75, by 75, Mick Taylor would be gone. They would bring in Ronnie Wood. Nothing against Ronnie Wood. I love him. But it represents, his time in the Stones represents a much different band than prior to that. I mean, there's nothing more different than the Ron Wood era of the Rolling Stones compared to the Brian Jones. Right, Rob?
Yep. So,
So they have the three eras of the Stones are the Jones period, the Mick Taylor period, and then the Ronnie Wood period, which lasted the longest. Ronnie Wood's been in the band for, going on 50 years. I mean, it's like 47 years. Okay. And he was actually hanging out with them even before that. They all knew him when he was in the Faces and everything. By 78, yeah.
You get that album, the Super Deluxe album?
Yeah.
For $73. $73.99 on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it to get. For the book, really, and for the live album. If you've never heard it. By 78, they made Some Girls, which many argue is their last great record. Okay, yeah. I could kind of agree, but I still think the Stones have another one in them if they could just kind of put a lot of bullshit behind them and just do what they're known for. Okay, you could. I mean, I don't know what their relationship with Mick Taylor is. I think it's pretty good. He occasionally has popped up on stage over the last 10 years. Okay. Would he ever join the band again on an album? That would be incredible. They should just do one thing like that and call it a day.
Call it a day. That's it. We're retired. We're done.
Yeah. I mean, they're pushing 80. Okay. And I believe they should play as long as they want to play. I'm not one of these people they're too old, because if you've seen the Stones in recent years, they're still high energy and they're still playing for 3 hours, and that's not easy to do. Okay. And thank God that they're, for the most part, they're pretty healthy and can still play and got it together. But I think they have another great album in them. I just hope that they can pull it out one day. Goat's Head Soup, though, classic. Everybody should own it.
Not bad, Mike. Man, what a fantastic album. What a journey from Exile or Maine to this album. Like, these two albums are pretty much solid albums. Like, it's Only Rock and Roll. It was like, okay, but people love that song. I don't really think that song is an iconic song, but people love it.
It's Only Rock and Roll is a great song, but the theme behind it to me, it was a change in what they were talking about. Okay, in their music. Exile was just dirty, swampy, muddy. Talking about
the good
drugs and pussy and then Goat's Head Soup is a little more of that. I mean, Heartbreaker has the drug references in it. There's a Coming Down Again, but with Richard singing most of it. Okay, there's a line in there where he says, "Stick my tongue in someone else's pie." Okay, what he's talking about is his relationship with Brian Jones falling apart because he took Anita from Brian.
Wow.
Remember they had that thing in Morocco?
Yeah.
Okay, so, then Brian was never the same after that. And, his thing, the lyric continues like stick my tongue on someone else's pie, getting better all the time. It's like he's just saying like, too bad, shit happens.
Wow.
But I mean, that's the beauty of Goat's Head Soup. Some of the lyrics and, some of the songs are slow. They start off slow and they speed up. 100 Years Ago has a good jam on it. Great.
I would have kept the song Starfucker.
The song is called Star Star, but they say Starfucker.
Starfucker, yeah. I wish they should.
Don't have it written on the record. So, all right, Rob. So, if anybody's looking for me,
right.
My social media handles, I got a lot. You got RockerMike on Facebook, RockerMike. Also, the Rock Show podcast group page on Facebook. Also, I am RockerMike212 on Instagram. I'm RockerMike on Twitter, CloudHub, Parler, MeWe, Getter, Truth Social, RockerMike.
And Mike, is November now, so we're pretty much winding up the end of the year again. We're going to see what we're going to do for the end of the year. The RockerMike Award.
Got to pick an album. I got a couple ideas for album of the year. That'll be in December, the last show. We'll try to get Scott the Clown back like we've been doing the last couple of years.
Is album of the year also group album of the year?
Well, yeah, right. We started last year with, solo artist album of the year and then group album of the year. We'll probably continue with that. And got to put up another special show for the beginning of December. Not sure what that's going to be yet.
Yes.
So stay tuned.
I think I like the idea of one-hit wonders.
We might do that. One-hit wonders. Yeah.
A one-hit wonder, and that's it.
Yep. So, all right, people. Thank you very much.
And remember, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
See you next time.
Take care, people.
Get lumped up tonight. Listen to Rob Rossi and RockerMike on the only podcast that I'll hear. That won't make me wanna rip off my